Greetings and welcome back. In the previous video, we showed you how to use the animation window to create this very useful animation. Let's actually jump over here with our sphere selected. And if we hit play, yeah, here's what we've got.
It is probably the most awesome animation I've ever seen.
Yeah, though probably not the most useful animation I've ever seen. So in this video, I want to show you two things kind of in tandem. One, that you can animate useful features, and that you're not only limited to animating transforms. You get both those points off in one video. Now, I'm going to leave this guy here. I'm going to close the animation window, and I may have some designs for this sphere a little later on, but what I want to do is come over here to our fire. Remember this from a while ago? Now this fire is several different objects all kind of stacked on top of one another. We have the model, we have the polygons, I'm sorry, the particles, excuse me. We have the particles that are giving our fire effect. We have a little sound emitter. We also have a light. And usually when I'm looking at fire, I find that the light tends to flicker. It doesn't just sit there and be constantly on like a light bulb. So let's use our animation window to cause our light to flicker. So to do this, I'm going to come into my hierarchy view, and this is already a prefab. So I'll expand camp, expand fire pit, expand flame. I'll grab my light source, and let's go ahead and drop down an animation component onto it. So let's go to component, miscellaneous, animation. Now, of course, we do get the warning here that this will lose the connection to the prefab parent. That's okay, no worries. Go ahead and click add. Now, currently, we have no animation to associate with this, so let's just jump straight into the animation window. And you can see we have the light source selected. So let's hit record, and as soon as we do this, our window pops up. Now we can go ahead at this point and we can open up animation clips, and this will end up in our project in the proper location. And we're going to call this fire light flicker anim. Click save, and we're now ready to go. So again, last time we were just animating transforms. Let's hide out transforms altogether, and let's expand the properties of the light. And we can animate all kinds of things in here. We can animate whether or not it's enabled. We can animate the color in RGB and alpha. We can change the spot angle if this was a spotlight. But what we're interested in is changing the intensity of the light, which by default is at a value of 1.081, and I'm sure some change after that. So what I'm going to do is just select that, and we will drop a keyframe right here. Now, as soon as I've done that, because I want to get all this other stuff out of the way, let's click on the show button down here at the bottom. So now all we see is what is animated. I mean, because we have a single keyframe, technically it is animated. Now, if we take a look here inside our timeline, right here inside of our curve view, we'll see that the range of values goes up pretty fast, pretty quick. We can already see from 0 to 1,000. So if my next keyframe was up here, our intensity would be at 1,000, which, I mean, that'd be like a small nuclear explosion.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's no longer a fire.
That's right. So what I'm going to do is tap the F key and frame up on that, and now that gets us to a range of about 1.2, which is probably a little closer to what we're going to be working with here. So now let's come forward. And here we are at 0.05 seconds. Now, that said, I want to point something out. This has nothing to do with using the animation window, but well, I guess you could argue that it kind of does. I'm going to put the animation window away for just a minute. And you'll notice one thing. First off, we don't have our fire flicker anim actually associated with our component yet. So let's go ahead and make sure that does get associated. But I'm also going to just select our animation component and take a look. Here is the sample rate. You might have heard me mention this in the previous video. This controls how many frames a second we're going to be sampling this animation. And because if you want to punch in a frame value, it's based on frames. It's based on that sample rate. Where right now, a value of 60 would be 1 second. If you set the sample rate down to 30, a value of 30 would become a second. It is kind of a divergence, but it is important. I wanted to make sure everybody did get a chance to see that. So with that said, let's go back into our light source and go back over to our animation window, and we can continue animating from here. So let's just go ahead and just show animated objects, and here's our intensity. It has our first keyframe. We'll tap F once again. Now, what I'm going to do is drag forward just a little bit in our timeline, and then let's just hit the keyframe button, and then we can slide this curve up and down, and you'll notice it is kind of subtle, but our light really is changing. So what I'm going to do is hold down Shift and roll my mouse wheel back to get a little bit more of a range of values here. And so we can turn this almost down towards 0 or up to really overly bright. So somewhere in here I'll find a nice range of values that we should be able to work from, probably right about here. So let's say for starters this gets a little bit bright. Now we need to zoom out in time as well. So I'm going to hold down Control and roll back with the mouse wheel. And this just gives us more time to work with. Now I can slide forward a little bit more, add another keyframe, and this keyframe I'll pull down so that we're actually dimming out the light. And let's see, we can pull that way down. You can really see the difference if you look right there in the middle of the fire pit. Now all I'm going to be doing over the next couple of seconds is just dragging forward a little bit at a time and just kind of alternating these values. The idea, though, is to make sure that they're not precise distances from one another, and certainly not precise values that you keep going in between. You want to feel a little bit of randomness here. At the same time, I'd suggest if this is your first time animating this kind of thing, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. You can always adjust the keyframes later. So let's just drop in a few keyframes for the fun of it. So we'll drag forward to some random location, drop down a keyframe, pull it down, drag forward again, drop down another keyframe. This one we're going to pull up to some random location. And let's slide further down the timeline and just truck along. I'll just add a few more of these. Just as quick as I can, not really thinking too much about them. Now, let's just say that's enough for now. We could add a lot of these. And the more you add, the more random this is going to end up feeling. If you only have like 3 or 4 keyframes, the repetition nature of the whole thing will start to show through, and the player will see patterns in the flickering. Remember, the human brain is really good at picking up patterns.
Right, and if you want to complicate it a little bit to break up that pattern, you could also go in and animate the range of the light. Sure. On a slightly different, but remember, because it is light, as your intensity goes up, you want your range to go up around the same time. You don't want your intensity of your light to go down and your range to go up. So,
sure.
But if you start layering the effects of these lights, or possibly 2 different lights alternating at different patterns, so let's say you've got one animation looping at 5 seconds and another one looping at 3 seconds. The offset of these 2 different animations
will make things feel really random.
Right.
Yeah. Now what I'm going to do is tap F real quick, and well, we had a keyframe selected, so let's just make sure we don't have a specific keyframe selected, and this will frame up on the whole curve. I'm going to take my animation wrap mode and set this over to ping pong. We could just as easily use loop if we wanted to, but just so we don't get any pops. And a pop might actually not be a bad thing, but I'm scared of seeing the animation change dramatically from one frame to another. And let's just give this a quick test in our game. Now, we could just play here, and it looks pretty regular, so, you know, I'm sure we're going to have something that looks very regular here as well, but let's just give it a test. And it's really not too bad. Not for being in the middle of daylight. But you can use this as kind of a way to figure out if you want to make any changes, so we could maybe pull back a little so we can see a little more of the tent, and then come back into our animation window. Go ahead and select only the animated objects. Now let's frame back up on this curve, and now maybe you're thinking, well, you know, maybe the first part of it could be a little faster. That's fine. Pull those keyframes a little bit further back. We could do a wider range of difference. So really all I'm doing is just grabbing and dragging some keyframes around. Very quick and easy. So now let's just try this. Now that's really dramatic. In fact, we're almost shutting off the light there at that one dip. So maybe we pull that down. And just by sampling and moving some keyframes around, you can start slowly perfecting this into exactly what you're looking for. Now, this is not, I'm not going to sit here and just keep tweaking this into the perfect fire flicker. I think I've got my point across, that you can just sit here and change your values. You can add a lot more keyframes if you want to. But let's go ahead and give this a quick play test. We'll close out our window, hit play. And we are now flickering our light. It's not, like I said, it's not the perfect fire flicker animation, but it's enough to get the point across that you're not limited just to animating the transforms of various objects. You can also animate other things, and in this case, things that are much more useful, such as the intensity of a particular light. Is there anything else you want to throw out, Lee?
No, this is good.
All right, so that is going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.